The applicant does get the last word.
I'm always a little bit, I wouldn't say surprised, I guess dismayed when the citizens do such a better job than lawyers do pleading their case. They're so much more eloquent. But anyway, I'm going to do my best hitting the legal points that I want you to take away when you leave here tonight. I'll start with a general point, which is this kind of feeling that the applicant has waited long enough. Those darn objectors have delayed this. That's not true. I mean, if this building conformed, there'd be virtually no delay. If it looked like 2007, that building, which was approved, there wouldn't be a delay. So don't blame the objectors for the delay. They're just sticking up for their town. I just also want to point out, you got to keep in mind, even though we presented some evidence today of an ulterior design and some other elements, we don't have the burden of proof. The applicant has the burden of proof. So you have to look at, we basically, I think during cross-examination, I'll go over this, showed where they hadn't met their burden of proof. And then today, what we did is we showed where we filled those holes in with a feasible project and why a smaller feasible project could work. And most specifically, that goes to the least relief necessary. This board has to grant the least relief necessary, and I think we proved beyond a shadow of doubt tonight, not that that's the standard, but we proved that a smaller building with less variances can be built there. Both the testimony of Mr. Lusk, but also Mr. Leo, who has experience in the area. So, not to beat a dead horse, but I would just say again that the previous variances expired. You're looking at this as it's new. They have to meet all the requirements of the variances that they're seeking. And I'm just going to run through them very quickly. You have to check off the following boxes. I'm sorry, I've been struggling with this thing all night. There we go. The hardship from which the applicant seeks is not due to the economic disability of the applicant. So it can't be the applicant's own financial situation that drives the variance. That's not grounds for variance. So the hardship that they complain of is not the result of any prior action of the applicant. The application does not result primarily from the desire of the applicant to realize greater financial gain. So it can't just be, hey, this project makes me more money than something that else at work. Again, I said the relief is granted is to be the least relief necessary. And that means not just only in terms of number of variances, but in the scale of each of the variances. Least relief necessary. And the ordinance especially warn, I said this at the beginning, that or no, I didn't say this at the beginning. The ordinances also say that the fact that a use may be more profitable or that a structure may be more valuable after relief is granted is not grounds for relief. So to the extent you've heard evidence that this is better than 20 is more profitable than 10, that can't be the grounds for relief. And I apologize if I'm preaching to the choir. You know your own standards, and you've already probably be thinking about this while you're listening to the testimony. I'll also mention the use variance. There has been no evidence presented that would meet the use variance standard. And I think that's been admitted by the applicant because it's their position that they're not asking for use variance. I have great respect for Mr. Tights, but I think that's silly. If you're asking from for permission to violate the literal dictates of the use table, it's a use variance. I sat on a planning board for 10 years. I mean, a zoning board for 10 years. If it comes out of that section, it's a use variance. If it comes out of the dimensional section, it's a dimensional section. And you can look at that use variance and see what the purpose was. It asks for certain specific commercial uses be in the first floor. And all the uses, you read through them, they're working waterfront uses. They're the uses that fit into the town of Bristol. So the people who drafted these ordinances, you can tell they put time into it because they said, we want in the waterfront zone, we want walking, neighborhoods, we want working neighborhoods, we want commercial use in the first 50 feet of this zone. To say that's a dimensional variance, I think is silly. Anytime you have a use specified for a portion of a property and you don't want to abide by that, is that a dimensional variance? I think that it defies common sense. Now, the applicant has claimed a number of hardships, but again, I think as Mr. Statura pointed out, the hardships have to be unique to this property. They can't just be the hardships that are suffered by the people in that neighborhood. And they can't be self-created. So reading from their memorandum, it's page 16, the introduced parking must meet future on-site parking needs, but also address the needs of the already approved residents on the adjacent parcels. Well, I don't think that's true. You're looking at lot 6. Lot 6 requires one parking lot, one parking space per unit. You looked at Mr. Lusk's design, he's got 9 units, you need 9 parking spaces plus some for the commercial. His design actually gave quite a few more parking spaces, probably would accommodate the, I think would accommodate the Belvedere Hotel as well, but you do not need 49 spaces. There is no rationale for 49 spaces. You look at the number needed for the Belvedere Hotel, you look at the number needed for the commercial space on the proposal, they do not come up to anywhere near 49. So you cannot grant that variance. There's simply not a hardship to support it. The hardship flowing from the flood zone, and again, this is from the applicant's memorandum, is a major causative factor for several deviations, inclusive of height and massing as well as scale of proposed building. Okay, let's use our common sense. It's in a flood zone, therefore it has to be 40 some odd feet tall. Does that make any sense? All these other buildings are down there are within the height variance? Of course not. The height is driven by the desire to have 20 units and 49 interior spaces. It has virtually nothing to do with the flood zone. It defies common sense to think that that is a hardship that warrants this level of relief. The overall height variance is a result of the action of Historic District Commission. Again, I think that's insulting your intelligence. They presented 2 buildings, both of which exceeded the height variance. They had different roofs. The Historic District Commission picked one of them. The Historic District Commission did not say, hey, Mr. Reuter, we want you to violate the height variance. You have to do that in order to get our approval. No, that's silly. They like to pitch roof because it looked better. But they left to you the obligation to decide whether it deserved a variance. And their decision on what looks better has no bearing upon your applying the ordinances. And again, the height, like the massing, is a hardship that is completely driven by the applicant's desire to maximize profit. The applicant claims that economic feasibility is a hardship that requires the granting of 14 separate variances. And he cites a case, Bilodeau, that explains that an owner is deprived of all beneficial use of his or her property when it is economically prohibitive to continue a present operation or convert to another permitted use. And that's the language they cite in their memorandum. Look back at the evidence. The applicant has completely failed to prove economic infeasibility or even introduce any evidence to the board to make that finding. Where's the pro formas? Where's the internal economic data? There is none. We've asked for it in a public records request to the Rhode Island Commerce Corp, and Mr. Reuter fought us. He said that that the information in the application would remain confidential. Such information related to project size, project cost, project description summary, project financing, SAT's equity of the project, SAT's ownership structure. Yeah.
Evidence he's reading to you, not closing argument.
Again, this is not a court. We don't follow the strict rules of evidence. I would point out that you're using up your time and you're basically 10 minutes into it.
Okay, I'm going to speed up. But anyway, You don't have any of that stuff. You don't know what his equity interest is. You don't know what the cost is. You don't have any of that information. And if you were trying to prove economic infeasibility, don't you think you'd include a spreadsheet or two that showed it? All he had was Peter Scotti, who said that 10 units is less profitable than 20 if the building costs the same to build. It's a worthless opinion. There's been no attempt to show that a smaller building could be designed. The architect admitted this in the cross-examination. Did you look at trying to design a smaller building? No, I was told to design 20 units. You have nothing here to support the fact, to make a finding that this is the least relief necessary. They haven't, I mean, if I was going to prove that, I'd show this one doesn't work, 10 units doesn't work, 5 units doesn't work, 4 units doesn't work. And I'd show you the cost and I'd show you the income. And I'd say, believe it or not, it may be hard to believe, but I've got a 19,000 square foot vacant land, and the only thing that's feasible on this property is a 20-unit condo with 49 internal spaces. It's the only thing you can build there. Everything else is economically infeasible. Beggars believe. I'm going to add 2 little minor points, but they're legal issues. The applicant is trying to apply section 452421, which changes the height variance that's required. That statute became effective on March 19th. The zoning board must apply the law that's in place when the application is deemed complete, and that's in the Bristol ordinance as well as the enabling statute. The elevator and vestibule, they don't count those towards the height, but the only thing that's exempted under the ordinance are elevator bulkheads. And they've admitted that what's up there is more than an elevator bulkhead. There's a vestibule, there's an area for people to stand, there's I'm sorry. I know, I'm trying to get out. Sorry.
Way over time.
All right, I'm going to finish up, and I apologize for going. Yeah, vestibule. There's a vestibule in there. Anyway, that's my last point. I'm sorry to go so long. I actually have quite a few things. I'm a lawyer. I have quite a few things else I'd like to say, but I'm going to stop here. I appreciate your time. I appreciate being here for now 4.5 hours. Thank you very much.